how to hide the stops and starts in your designs. So if you're using any pen, you can get marks where you stop and where you start and where you pause. Felt pens are especially challenging for this because if you put them down in one spot, they will bleed ink into the paper. So most people, because it's really appealing and it's really easy, just kind of put the pen in and then they start going, and that's fine and that will work all right. But you will notice that you will consistently get just like a little bit of bleed and a little bit of overlap there where you started and stopped, because the pen's still for a moment before you start. And also because you are starting pushing the gear, there will often be like a little tail in or something depending on how well you place the pen. So here's 3 tips for how to avoid that. Tip 1 is, if you're gonna start here, put the pen, and this is hard because it's straight up and down. So you're good, instead of putting the pen all the way down, you're just gonna put the pen into the pen hole, like pressing on the side of the hole, and start rolling the gear like that. And then once it's moving just a touch, you can actually touch the pen down to the paper. So you put it in and you start rolling and then you place it down. And so you can see the line didn't quite start at that base curve. And now as long as I keep going nice and smoothly, everything else is going to be consistent. And ta-da! There we go. Already much better hidden. And that little bit of overlap, if you do the design, whole design twice, won't be visible. It won't even be that visible. Okay, so that's 1. 2. And so that helps both because then you're not sitting still bleeding ink, but you also don't have that little tail in because the gear's already moving in its arc once you get going. And so you can use that with all your approaches, but another simple approach is, so you want your gear alignment like this, and often, you know, if you're doing a complicated design where you want to count over 2, you need to look at the alignment. But that's the most obvious sort of solo part of the design. Now, if we just roll the gear a bit, it's got the same starting point, but we can just kind of start in the middle of the design. And especially for very dense designs where there's a lot of lines crossing, that will be hidden very effectively. And so I'm just taking my own advice to go over this whole thing twice here. And now, if you look really closely in this specific example, you can still see where I started it, but it does not stand out at all like this one. So yeah, you can do a rolling start, and you can change where your starting point on the design is, especially if you're doing a compound design. If you choose a slightly different starting point, like if I was to shift this, you know, over 2, instead of going here and be like, ah, yes, I'll start here again, I could just go there and just have a different start point. These are all simple ways to prevent that little bit of bleeding from the stationary pen or from the cold start pushing the gear. Yeah, and that's just one way to make your designs just a little bit crisper all the time.